chilly crickets. They are going to get frostbite this year. Absolutely. So now we see what goes on in the world. Not only do we not do anything, when we try and do something, we do it all wrong. Now I'm speaking of Ferguson. For those of you that have heard it, and I'm kind of surprised and actually happy to hear, not a lot of people are really hearing about Ferguson. In other words, lots of places aren't really affected, which is probably a good thing in my estimation as to what I'm seeing compared to what we need to be doing as a people, in a society, in this country, the United States of America. Hope you all had Thanksgiving dinner, and plenty of it. We'll have leftovers for a week, as usual. About nothing goes to waste at this time of year, as we're fattening up behind the woodshed. Last little bits that we can. And it's actually been kind of warm. A little warm, actually. It's dropped off about 20 degrees since yesterday, so maybe winter's going to be finally here at some point. And no doubt I'll still hear the crickets. Because until we figure out what we really need to do, we will be directed where we are being directed, period. That's it. As we keep looking at this. And I suppose maybe lots of people don't like to keep looking at this. And a lot of people throw their hands up. And whatever, even the word despair came to mind, but I don't know that it's despair. The more I look out, I wonder, how much do we just like to hear about stuff that keeps our mind engaged on a wheel in a circle. We're in that revolution, aren't we? Don't ever go anywhere and don't ever get anything done, but we're in that revolution, round and round and round. This is going to require that we stop whatever is wrong. And that's why I keep asking you, find something. There's got to be something that you don't like in what you see, local to you, that you can figure out a way, something that violates you enough that you'll do something about it. And I don't really, my sense is I don't care what you choose. Just choose something and find out that you are, all by yourself, you can cause the change we were told everyone thought was coming on us. Didn't realize hope and change was really the change that was going to fall out of the hole in your pocket, and the hope that the serfdom and the slavery would stop and the beatings would stop. That's all that was. And I predicted that pretty well. That's pretty handily. It was well done before the unqualified one. As I told you, this has been a long, long time. This has been the social plan. When you start to look at more of what appears to be more of the reality than what you're told, and you start seeing the words used, the actions taken in a wholly different light. When you stop putting in your mind what you've been told is supposed to be, and stop prejudicing yourself on the titles that you've been given, you start to relieve yourself of the problem, and then you develop a new one. First of all, is how are they able to get you into that prison, and how are you going to break out? That usually comes pretty prevalent and relevant to whatever anybody I talk to eventually finally starts to see this stuff, and it takes a long time. In some regards, maybe I've forgotten how long it's really taken, although I don't. I know it's been decades and decades and decades. But I'm talking about when your mind flips over, at least for the first time. When you're literally, you feel like your brain is flipped upside down in your head. You've read enough at that point to know that you are not going back. And then as I've gotten through into this, it is like an onion. It's not quite as humorous as the onion, but it is an onion. And you have to figure out, which you'll find, if you're interested, you'll find you have to continue to learn and learn and learn about this false reality. Whether or not we get to the real reality, I don't really know, but at least we have to stop the false reality that we're more than, what did you have Thanksgiving for, really? In the context of why it was fabricated for us. Why did you have Thanksgiving? Now, I know we all turn personally and we say, I'm thankful for all the people I have around, the family and all this other, and I'm not worse off than the other guy in the ditch. I'm at least laying up on the curb. That's a little better than laying in the ditch where the gutter water runs. What level of where is your tear in the stinking abyss? That you look out and you see everything's okay and don't do not much of anything about it. So I'm completely thankful at one level. Really, I tell you, it's a marvel to look out in the world. I just can't imagine being here anywhere else right now to watch this interesting time that we are in. And to have a really, I believe, for myself, I think I have an awareness to watch it. I mean, it's not I may be clueless on some things, but I'm not clueless on all this. And it's not just identifying how screwed up it is. It's actually going through, just permeating through the abject tyrannical despotism that we tend to believe is something other than tyrannical despotism. Again, I mean, what world do you live in when cops can just execute you? When did that become okay that we were silent? See, the Ferguson thing is, you have to know it's a fabricated thing. It's an event. I was listening to it the other night. In fact, I happened to just stop a major project. Finally got a major project finished and filed that afternoon. I happened to take a quick little relax, and just the Ferguson thing hit. And I happened to be on Twitter, looked and seen, and it was just a stream of stuff that was coming out of whatever, even the indie media people. And I just got the impression as I was watching this over a few hours unfold, it was as if they were going through a script. All of a sudden there was in the beginning there was nothing. It was as if they were showing nothing happening for hours, and then all of a sudden Ferguson erupted, and then the arsonists went to play. And then they calmed down. And then there was a lull in the news. And then all of a sudden, the looting story started. And then there was a calm in the news about that. And then the peaceful protesters got involved. And then there was a lull in that news, whatever they were doing, whatever they were reporting on. It was almost like, okay, this is Act 1, Scene 2, Act 4, Scene 3. And they were just moving people through the stage called Ferguson. Now, you couldn't see that if you just kind of dropped in and just looked at certain news articles. But over the time, I started to realize this is starting to feel literally like a play. And we know about the crisis actors and all this, Sandy hoax and all these other things that are called false flags. They're not false. I don't think they're false flags when they're planned. I mean they're planned and we know it. It's not like they're getting over on some of us. So it looks, really like a setup. And then so it's to look through that, I think is why I try to come behind the woodshed to try and tell you this is what we have to look through. And why do I want you to do that? Because I want you to quickly get through it so that you can get back to the work. Whatever the work is you've chosen to do to make one little thing better in the world than when you left. And it doesn't have to be that big to start, and hopefully you continue. And I suppose a lot of people don't like to hear that. Obama puzzled by annual turkey pardon. He says, it's the unqualified one here. It is a little puzzling that I do this every year, but I will say that I enjoy it because with all the tough stuff that swirls around in this office, it's nice once in a while just to say, Happy Thanksgiving. I'm here to announce that what I'm sure will be the most talked about executive action this month. Today, I'm taking an action that is fully within my legal authority. No, this is at the dig that it has been given against him for all the other authorities that are highly questionable, if not just outright outlandish and unlawful. Not just illegal, but unlawful. But he doesn't know what he's doing pardoning these turkeys. And partly I have to agree. What are you pardoning turkeys for? Why did you also pardon the other war criminals in previous administrations? Was that actually within your authority? They just state this stuff. I don't know if anybody thinks about this. Is it all right for him to take the color of authority to exonerate a war crime or a felon in office? The statutes I look at, even the statutes I look at, not the law, but the statutes say that's a felony to do that, and it's a felony to have been the perpetrator. He doesn't know why he's pardoning these turkeys, and then I think we found out a couple days later. Turkeys pardoned by Obama have all died. Only one of the 8 Thanksgiving turkeys pardoned so far by President Obama, or President Barack Obama, the unqualified one, lived to see another Thanksgiving. Now, I don't know. This is fascinating to me. Now, what came up in your mind? As soon as I saw that, I realized this guy's saying, well, I don't know why I do. Why am I pardoning these turkeys? He doesn't tell you that they all die. But what comes up in your mind about that attitude and that act? And I don't know if it did for you. It certainly did for me. Immediately, Obama scare pops up in my mind. Folks, I tell you, there's symbols here. There's meanings behind all this. This is telling you what that system was set up to do. Soylent Green comes to mind right beyond that. He doesn't know what he's doing this for because he knows that the care that's going to happen after will not be everything that they told you that it will be. And I know there's a whole lot more discussion about this whole thing, and I mean just on the turkey side and all that, whatever, all the ones that are not pardoned and all this nonsense that we could get into. But to me, this was indicative of Obamacare. Except to the extent that maybe it wasn't so lawful. My mind focuses really clearly, and even this is the Bar Association, these corrupters and adulterators, the Queen's Council, the Queen's Esquires, the servants to the knights, the Esquires. This is all feudal. I don't know what service that they're performing here. They're certainly destroying everything they do, but they've allowed that now maybe a tax may not have to originate in the house. So just want to point out these little things. Here, he doesn't know what the heck he's doing this for because he knows all these turkeys are going to die, and they're supposed to have the best care available, and they're dying. And I just say, this guy is just telling you that this is the care that his plan made. What it was a tax. It was the bottom line for all the pharma, and this guy's pretty much telling you this. In a way, I tell you, they don't lie, actually. If you just got to listen to what they're actually telling you, not what they're saying, but actually what it means. So, I think this is indicative. He doesn't know what the heck he's doing this for. Same thing as with his plan. He wants to tell you he doesn't know. He doesn't know why he goes through the formality when the truth is not going to work out. And I get to come out here and say, Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. That washes it all clean now. It just fascinates. The more I have to be careful thinking about this stuff, my mind just starts to wander all over the place of what we are being shown if we would just look at it. And I can't do that all on this broadcast. There's just so much to do. In fact, I was looking at I'm building my tabs up again. I've got to go back and clean a lot of them out. I get to so many tabs so much to talk about. So much to point out. Not just talk about it, I mean just point it out. And I'm hoping somebody finds some of this stuff important enough to go investigate it. There's a lot of people that got hurt on this Obama scare. A lot of corporations are now figuring out one of the provisions requires that there's some kind of a health check, and that's been found to be unconstitutional as well. And they're going to use that now to not give the care. Again, this was all set up for a corporate bottom line. And when you start seeing that that's what the government does, It legalizes crime for the purposes of the national interest, which is the bottom line. And there's whole systems of things set up around getting this position advanced right under your nose. Right under your nose. It's just really, I sit back and think how fascinating, how frail we are in our observational powers. Even like for myself, looking and wondering, well, how much am I not seeing? If I see this much, how much am I not seeing? That I come to tell you this to hopefully you're using it on your own, and I hope it translates. This is not about Obamacare. It's not about the unqualified one. It's not about all the problems. It's not about turkeys. It's about your power of observation in a critically thinking way. And I don't know how well I do that. I just know what part I think I do pretty well, just to keep me from. It's not just not buying in; it's to buy in correctly. Again, I've said, and I'll say this to plenty of times, because I've heard lots of people try to do this. You don't deny an authority in someone else. You have no power to deny. You can go ahead and accept it. It doesn't mean it has any power over you. It just means that it just exists. That you have to know the distinction between you and anything else, and why borders are important. I think what I'm saying, I'm talking about in the way you think. I mean, you get on the ground, you can't find a borderline one, but that's not what we're talking. We're talking the fabricated. There's a whole fictions around all this that we tend to constrain ourselves by. And like the immigration situation. At one point, I understand completely why you have to have a border, but I'm talking about it in the context of a global takeover, where essentially corporations are running the show, and there are no borders. The UN-derived NGOs that are coming to steal your water. They come to steal your freedom, steal your women, steal your babies. I call them child. They destroy your families. These are the borders that have been broken down that I'm kind of speaking to. And they do it in really kind of interesting ways. And so I bring these, story. I could care less about the unqualified one and his turkey pardon. He certainly hasn't pardoned quite a bit that we might be able to still go after. But this is the problem. The other thing that I see, where is it that what kind of a society you live in when the despot, the tyrant, just gets away with ruling immunity upon whatever they're doing? And this is my big problem with the NDAA. The memo, actually, admitting it. All of this is what they've done. Again, to remind you, extrajudicial means you have no more government. You don't have a 3-part government. If you ever thought that was a possibility, it's gone. And then they come from the Supreme Court, supposedly the highest authority for law in this country. It's really the highest authority for legal, as far as I can tell. And then it's just opinions. This is the other problem with all these are all just opinions. The next best guess, based on the information that they get. And you're going to find this is the problem as I move in through more of these reports and stories. This is a problem we'll see with Ferguson. And this is our ignorance about the whole process. And we're doing the wrong thing. I guess there's lots of things we could be doing. Maybe I don't know. But I can tell you a couple of things that we'll get to that we're doing the wrong thing. So we only can go on the information we're given. I guess that's going to be a theme today as I make these things up as I go to try and figure out points of interest and points of contact with the content. We're only as good as the information we're given, and we can only rely on the best information of the instruments that we create. The fraud of silence is a killer for us, and that's why I say you have to create. In a way, it's actually being able to see through the silence that has meaning. Find the silence that has the real meaning and start moving with that as well. That's the hardest one to identify. That's the hardest one to be assured of as well. But so it takes a lot of work at that level. And maybe there's a lot of people that don't want to do that. But I'm saying and I'm suggesting, and I have been for a long time, that that's an excuse. if we intend better for us, that's an excuse. And it's not rational, and it's not actually realistic. It's not real. It's just another excuse. Excuses on top of excuses, instead of doing what we really, stepping up and doing what we have to do. So on this information going into, we only can do as well with the information we have to act on what we know. You find we're always a jury of people. As I tell you, you're a nation unto yourself in the context of international law. You have you're organized. You have organs that create your body, held by your body, that do functions, and the functions that we have, however we want to describe them, as we have the rule making, our own rules for ourselves, how we execute those rules for ourselves. We have to rely on international basis for interaction with other nations like ourselves. We have then a judicial body within ourselves that judges what we do. We carry all these things with us, and we're always receiving information in whatever capacity. And our instruments are highly needed for doing that. So one of the other things I keep wanting to point out, not because I want to point out any more the fact that it's a fraud, but how to make your discussion with yourself very, very efficient. And then being able to convey that to other people so we can get past all the garbage they throw in our face, cut right through it and continue and persist on what we need to get done. What we choose is a wrong that needs to be righted and doing so. And so that we're not persuaded away from continuing. Because the other thing is persistence on the point. If we don't do that, it becomes very, very difficult. As I was telling you, in writing the last project here, writing the paper for the suit in response to the court, we've identified, it's one thing to be able to say the system's corrupt. It's another one to create the proof based on have your own theory about why it's corrupt and actually prove that out. We're in our own scientific proceeding right now, gathering the proof eventually for everybody to find for themselves beyond opinion. That what we're having to do is becoming very technically accurate and very finite. Again, focusing on the point and not letting things get in your way. This is how this ends up being done correctly. And if you see the people that are infiltrators, that's what they do. And you can get lots of lessons and take if we didn't know how to do it before, we just look at those that are big. They say, take the success and don't reinvent the wheel. Take the success as you find it and mimic that for a while until you have it for yourself. But we have we talk about this this fiasco that's really important because it's moving into the future in a way that's going to hurt us very, very badly. It's why all these things that I talk about and repeat, talk about are important in aspects that seem to go by people, and we see this problem of the important things going by people. It really, again, Ferguson is another object lesson for me to look at to see. What is it that makes us fail? How are we failing here? What steps in? Can we identify what steps in? And then find out whether that was good or bad, and then identify how the bad of that is really around us. And it seems to go there quickly. To influence bigger matters. That, that the IPCC has this anthropomorphic theory that man causes this effect to the global environment, which is comes in the form of heating, warming through CO2. Well, a very interesting story right around Thanksgiving. So, and I hope you all had plenty to eat and continue to have plenty to eat as you move through the food. I saw people saying that there was some wasted food over the weekend. I go, how do you have wasted food? In Thanksgiving. I just don't get that. Even the bones turn to soup here what came up I found interesting, again, how these things tie together and how we tie them together. What came up was interesting of something called the Potsdam gravity potato. Now you may not eat this. This may not go into your mashed taters. The Potsdam gravity potato, what we call behind the woodshed the Potsdam gravitator, is an interesting image of the Earth. It shows how unround the Earth is, but it's really an experiment. Gravity gone wild. See Potsdam gravity potato, the gravitator. Earth's eerie gravity anomalies revealed in new satellite images. Now, I'm sure you're not going to. This is not a tater to eat, but we can digest the information that we're given. And what's important about this is what it kind of shows again. We have instruments that was based on science, so they tell us, and we use it to come up with information. But this information that we're getting is the most accurate. So to date, which shows us we still have a ways to go. I mean, our resolution on looking at these things, our instruments are not as finite as we expect, but we have a way to. We have a 2-satellite mission. They're called Champ and Grace, and they are a part of what they call an airborne gravimetry and satellite altimetry. And what they do is they go along and they, between themselves and the Earth and the fields, they measure gravity as best as our models can say, and our models can predict. What I found fascinating about this story was, and it's very fascinating, the Earth is really not all round. It's really contorted. You actually see a big chunk taken out of it. But what I found fascinating about this report, and I'd like you all to kind of look at this, is the name of this actually shows that they're pushing the theory that gravity is related to climate. In other words, the name GRACE is Gravity, Recovery, and Climate Experiment. And in this story, they actually tell you that that's why it's named that, because they're actually pushing an agenda within this issue. What I found fascinating, though, and what you need to look at, because we can cut right through this now. If we say this is science, and I have to say this is science, whether or not the models and the theories, and they're always adjusting the science behind the models and all this other stuff, so they keep trying to get more accurate on our understanding of what the Earth is, which I tell you is fantastic stuff. But what fascinating about this article is from the people that are doing this project came a very interesting article and statement. That they said that gravity is climate. Gravity is climate. Think about this, folks. Gravity is climate. Just in time for the 10th anniversary of the twin satellites, Gravity, Recovery, and Climate Experiment, a sharp image has surfaced which also renders the spatial distribution of the glacial melt more precisely. The GRACE gravity field measurements, therefore, give us information on mass changes, including climate-related ones. But there's more. The uneven distribution of mass on and within the planet causes, due to the resulting variability of gravity, the Earth to have an irregular shape which deviates significantly from sphericity. That was tough. I guess it's sphericity. I guess if I put the right accent. Known as the Potsdam gravity potato, or the gravitator behind the woodshed, the geoid, which is this shape of what the Earth actually is, has achieved global notoriety. But this potato shape is equally subject to temporal changes. During the last ice age, a mile-thick ice sheet covered North America and in Scandinavia. Since the ice melted, the crust, now liberated from its load, continues to rise to this day. This causes material in the Earth's interior, in the mantle, to replenish. Now, my question right there is, folks, replenish with what? They never say about that, but that's just fascinating to me. Replenish with what? As we find out, the world might be more plastic, if you will, not in plastic, but in puttyability here than first thought, at least. That this Earth, the release of this pressure allows the mantle to replenish. I just want to know what. What's replenishing? Isn't it a sealed system, we're told? I think we're hearing here that there's a more dynamic system that can answer why we don't know much, because we just don't know much. But the satellites were very interesting in that they tell us that there's a hair's breadth of measurement here. The gravity field measurements with the satellite is so small that people cannot measure them, cannot feel them, which becomes very interesting to me in the sense of the masses that you're dealing with on being affected by such a small force. Are pretty impressive. They're beyond us to know about. They're beyond us to consider, actually, in our own mind, without any other manifestations, without any other thoughts. From the varying distances between the two satellites, GFZ scientists can determine the gravitational field of the Earth. This is also based on models, so they're finding out their models need to be revised. You get lower. I'm not reading all this report, but you get later on, they find out later that they can actually adjust the model, and they're getting 2 times more efficient, and those reports are coming out in the future. Those models are coming out in the future, but remember, they already said it's climate related. Gravity is climate. I hope you've already got an answer in your head about what this says when I finally get to it. Approximately every 30 days, a satellite pair has collected enough data for a complete global map. This monthly survey of gravity is at least 100 times more accurate than any previous model. See, again, folks, these models are what they rely on making. And we find out they're inaccurate. In other words, the IPCC model, based on what? And that's the secret here where I'm going to get to. I'll let you put based on what? What's in their definition? What's omitted from their definition? This is where the truth is in the science. That if you have enough information early on, had you had this story here 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, or even in the 90s, in the 69 when they started all this nonsense, this particular nonsense, we would not be here today. Had there been an honest appraisal of even this theory that gravity is climate. Many processes, listen folks, this is what I keep telling you about their darn models. Many processes in the climate of our planet are accompanied by large-scale water mass redistributions, which are made visible in a gravitational field. This enabled, as the name of the mission suggests, the first observation and analysis of homogeneous and globally numerous climate-related processes from the monthly gravity field models over the last 10 years. So they're admitting they're getting better and better. You tell me, how has the IPCC come up with the hypothesis when they still are gaining data? And it's changing the outcome. And what did this scientific article say here? But that there are many processes contributing that are climate related. What is the problem with that statement compared to what we hear is being used by the United States government, by every government in the world to suppress people in the developed nations and then put into slavery the people in those developing nations underneath the three-legged stool we can see under Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development. And now they oppress people in developing nations with this carbon taxation nonsense. And I'm going to show you how carbon cannot even be part of this. Why? Just think about this, folks, as I'm moving along here. Why is carbon not a part of this? Didn't the title of this article say why carbon is not a part of this? Didn't the title of this article tell you why the definition the IPCC uses of it, the causation of global warming, is not a factor? And didn't this part of the article tell you that there are more than one processes and factors when determining climate, even though they've said one thing is climate? Now, either this whole theory is completely screwed up, which I can't say completely. Again, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a ton in here that's correct. But you know, they actually admitted there, I read it, they actually named their project to tie climate to gravity. So this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, no different than the IPCC can do. Again, we know they can make algorithms, they're just made up. We just like the United States government does to show that, well, when we have a depressed economy, we'll make it look good. We have the price increase of product, and we'll show it's a decrease. These are just math problems. You know, when I went to math, it was just to try and figure problems out. It wasn't to use the rules in order to come to make an outcome. So we have many, many processes in climate that that doesn't become part of the populist discussion. And what we tend to do is we just throw it all down and say, oh, I either don't agree with it or I'm going to be an evangelist for it. Instead of looking at this like I think we need to do and say, okay, well, this is what science is. No, I'm not saying this article. I'm saying we can identify what science is. And there's enough scientists out there that are now speaking. This is what science is, and this is what it's not. And you people that are not are criminals. And there's accountability for criminality, which somehow has gone by the wayside. And the people who wrote the memo and the administration that agreed with it in the memo for the justifying, excusing away the right to do NDAA, take away all your rights and indefinite detention without courts and without any notice ahead, and then the cops can execute you on site. And I pointed all out why that is. It's not because you ever lived in a constitutional republic and form of government, despite the fact it says so. But you don't see how that this is reality anymore. You have to start saying, wait a minute, we have to start forming reality. We are given complete license. If we have a natural law, we are given complete license to now say, hold the bus. Hold that bus. We got some people, some riffraff to throw off the bus and get them put into get some accountability on it. Instead, we go out in the street and we hold up all the rest of the traffic and we hurt other people. And we torch the bus. Well, before that, we break out all its windows. And then we flip it over. Well, before that, we called the news, because it makes good press, right? What we're seeing right here in this one article, which I think is science, even though it's been directed, even though we can see that it's laid out to prove a point, we can see within the discussion and what they're using to invalidate entire other areas of promotion and propaganda. That I'm doing this only to explain to you that in this one article, you should be able to see once you read it. I'm not the only thought on this. You'll see what you see. But in my mind, you see a way to quickly eliminate what. See, this people don't appreciate how deep this goes with how it relates to everyone's life in the street and in your house, right to your house. Because by this science, they ultimately will try to promote this carbon taxation, which you'll just come up on a utility bill. Your power starts to cost a lot more. Your gasoline starts to cost a lot more. Anything you actually do starts to cost a lot more. They go through the corporations to do that on top of it, and they tax you for it. They then have to big up support systems that you end up paying through your property taxes, such as those of you that think that you hold less than fee simple and not fee simple. And so you don't tell the government that they violated a public trust in the conveyance of that property that you have. We don't understand how to even approach a lot of this. That I'm trying to point out this information to get you over there to start doing better. That this article saying that gravity is climate and then admitting there's a whole lot more involved in the processes of the earth, not only admits to what's going on, it invalidates this as well as the IPCC, as well as any government support jumping on global governance and by way of sustainable development. That if you can just put together what I'm saying through these broadcasts, that I'm hoping, like I said, I'm trying to empower a better discussion in us so that we are not defeated when we finally stand up and go do what we're supposed to do to stop the wrong that needs to be righted. Now, these satellites are running around. It's fantastic. I mean, really, it's fantastic stuff. But there's an agenda behind it, but that's notwithstanding that. This article says that gravity, let's go with it. Gravity is climate. I find that fascinating. Who knows? Maybe they're right. They just haven't quite got quite enough yet to figure out how to really prove that out. Now, anyway, let's keep this data that they get reached the GFZ via its own receiving station in Spitsbergen, and are delivered to the global weather centers within 2 hours to improve global forecasts. To improve global forecasts. In addition, these data are used for studies of climate-induced changes in the Earth's atmosphere. So they snuck it in. But they admitted there's something that induces the changes in climate, didn't they? They admitted that part. They also admitted something that that kind of proves out some other problem. If these global weather centers every 2 hours are getting the global forecast data that they use, how has the IPCC and all the weather stations you hear supporting it, and all the MSM, mainstream media people who agree with it, or anybody who believes this stuff, how have they gotten it wrong for 18 to 2019 years some here, where the temperature, despite the shooting up of carbon dioxide, despite that, we have a leveled off temperature. That proves that the IPCC's model's wrong, but you also see that they may not even care about this data. These data is used in studies, which they don't care about. And so this is a direct condemnation of anyone who supports the IPCC position of what? Anthropomorphic climate change, which is man-made global warming, which is Michael man-made global warming. Michael man-made global warming, no doubt. The hockey stick, remember? Hide the decline, all that stuff. The only thing man-made is that Michael man-made this, and he did it on not really listening even to the fact, at least other science says that gravity is climate. The professor resorted to, Professor Hootel, is confident to this an explanation of all this in this article. He says, we hope that the Christmas of 2016 two Grace FO follow-on satellites will orbit around the Earth because only long time series can provide reliable information on global trends in climate. Well, I looked at that and said, so what have you been doing before this? How does the IPCC relevant? Well, let's get back to the top of this title of the article. I want to prove something to you. Gravity is climate. Let's reduce this to a arithmetic formula. Gravity is climate. Gravity equals climate. Now, gravity equals climate. This is a science now, an article. I'm just reading off the top of this. Gravity equals climate. That's the formula. I want to remind you now of a formula we saw. And now this guy is condemned. And I know no doubt why the products that he produces, called windows, if it was a sail, would be so full of holes needing to be patched, it would never leave the dock. It would never gain and fill in the wind line when it finally went out where the wind was past the break. that Bill Gates told us another type of formula. That under the theory that CO2 was climate change, he had a formula of carbon dioxide, CO2, equals P, which is people, times services per person, times energy per service, times the carbon dioxide per unit energy of those services. I want to ask you, what relevance is, where do you see in the formula gravity equals climate? Where do you see the CO2? What part of the formula is CO2 in G equals C? Nothing. Let's go to the IPCC now. Human-caused global warming. Where gravity equals climate, where do you see human causation in that formula? There is none. Absolutely zero. Where gravity equals climate, no other thing makes climate, apparently, in science. Now we can see that all these promoters are absolutely lunatics. There are irrational people on the face of the earth, and they intend you to hurt you, because this Bill Gates formula that he used, where people times the services times the energy CO2 per energy used equals CO2, and they want to get rid of CO2, despite the science. They're talking about getting rid of you. In a multiplication formula that equals something, you have to make it the CO2 on the one side be zero. They're looking to get rid of you on the other side of the equation. And guess what? Gravity is climate, not you, not the services, not energy, not the CO2 per unit, not even CO2. Human causation is not the point of the harm, because gravity is climate. Now, you have a story, you have a report. It's a fascinating look. Neat pictures. I couldn't even make heads or tails of it, actually, because they never give you what the colors mean, which is fascinating to me, that why they don't tell us what these colors mean. They actually show, what I gathered from it, though, is, if I'm right, and I could be inverted on this, that they're showing, remember now, they said that the ice relieved, and it lifts the land, because there's all that weight off the top. That's not necessarily more mass. It's just more, it is in a spot, but I mean, it's, the rock itself isn't. You're looking at, on the ground itself is where there is a depression. But, so you relieve that pressure and it rises, and they got measurements about this. But the force that's doing that is so infinitesimal that you and I can't feel it. However, I found it fascinating that one of the rising points, which should be lesser gravity, which means that it's not being pulled to the center of the Earth by that lesser dense mass, is right over Iceland and Greenland, where one of the volcanoes is spewing its guts continuously. To kind of show you that if there's lack, that it's not the fact of the lack of gravity, that's a fact, that when you have less gravity, the Earth will spew stuff in that direction, and it will rise up because there's less gravity force pulling down in that spot. It's not a uniform field, which is a whole new fascinating process. Interestingly, there's another place which the boundary of which is over near Banda Aceh. The peak of it is sitting out also, as interestingly, in the Marianas Trench area, which would pretty well eliminate the thought that the lack of gravity rises up, because the Marianas Trench is deeper than the Everest. Mount Everest is tall. It's a fascinating place. Yet you also know that's a place where there's a lot of volcanic activity and earthquake activity. What this thing tells us is fascinating, but I wanted to point out where I saw gravity. The scientists say gravity is climate. Not even Michael Mann has anything to say about it. Where we look at these agencies that are taking us down, where they make these rulings and their science is deferred to. This article, for those of you that would want to, this article that states that gravity is climate undermines everything they've done in the regard of controlling your life in the future. And what I guess is another technique, whether you know this or not, I don't know, I'll let you know. But what the coolest thing to do, better than you fighting, is as they get us divided, you find ways to get that system divided. This will be one of the ways you could do it. You say, well, science says gravity is climate. It can't be CO2. You've destroyed their scientific integrity, which is, well, now we move into here in the next moment or two about Ferguson. And you now corrupt the condition that they were using as science, which I told you last week was it's actually best available science, or best science available. And that ends up being whatever they make up when there's no science at all. Even these gravity experiments based in an agenda. It was telling to me. I don't know. I see this all the time, I guess. This is how they take us down. This is how they lead us, that ring in the nose that I talk about periodically. And I'm telling you to take it out. This is one of those rings in the nose that if you can see the way they do this, you see that you can take it out for other things just like it. They do this in all kinds of things. That I use one science to attack a purported science. I then even attack the science that says it's science, and that throws the whole thing into a mix. And I'm getting to the point to tell you and remind you, we just don't know. We aren't even non-ego driven enough to say that, to just have sensors out in the world that just start taking data. I mean, when I was coming up to be a scientist, it was like almost the sin that you would have a model before you collected data for decades, maybe. Depending on what you were studying. Now they have a model, and then they go get the science that fits it. That should have been a clue. No different than they make this experiment, or gravity experiment, measurement device, pursuant to their outcome, which they want to prove that the ice melting is causing sea level rise. I mean, this is the underlying point. And yet, within the context of the discussion, you find out there's a whole lot more than just melting icebergs, isn't there? So I ran across another thing. It was kind of fun, a cartoon, and it kind of indicative, again, of the truth behind this. The role of media in aiding and abetting the deception seen in ClimateGate. There's a little picture of the IPCC convention with a question that asks, hands up, who thinks greenhouse gases have no effect and therefore we all need new jobs? Anyone? And this seems to be the point. People are making up things in order to justify their existence. These are just sophisticated parasites. Now, I want to see the science. I want to see the science free of any propaganda and political end. So I was telling you, as we find out, the politics must be, to survive, for a nation to survive, politics cannot interfere with production or those capacities such as land possession. Politics has to be removed from production. No different than the science. That when you see it, any of these things that are crucial to your society, politicized, you're in a deep, deep trouble. And I hear crickets. I see big crickets in Ferguson. The science here says, well, you got the IPCC formulating the question that no one wants to answer the truth to. Who thinks greenhouse gases have no effect and therefore we all need new jobs? This is perfect. This is the epitome of what goes on here. But this is even deeper than just jobs, folks. This is governments oppressing people globally. On what I believe I see clearly in this gravity is climate discussion to throw the whole thing down. If you would just step up and do it that way. Now, that said, we need help, but I mean, we're going to do what we can on our own. But you know, it's always better to have everyone watching your back and standing shoulder to shoulder. I'd surely like to see more people coming to help fight the fire that we're fighting in the courts right now against the system itself as well. We're attacking all this, and if it ever became a question, you darn well better believe that we're going to show. I collect these things now just in case. Even though in law we have prevailed, in the legal world we're in war. Because in legal we have an occupier and an adulterator in your life that you may or may not understand. And I'm talking to the level more than, oh yeah, they're just there and corrupt. No, I'm talking about having an intimate knowledge of the who, what, where, why, how, the mechanisms, the infiltration, the surroundings, literally knowing the battlefield that they've told us is around us. You know, we filed our suit before they declared the battlefield. We declared that battle a year before that declaration. It's time, folks. You get into the moment. You get into, if you want to talk about synchronicity, you want to know what synchronicity is? Get into doing something and you'll find out when you're in and out of synchronicity real fast. This is partly about a bunch of parasites, do-gooders that are creating a reality around you, and to ruin your life, literally, to control the way they see. See, at some point, it doesn't even have the standards that they have, because those standards are changeable, only to keep the control, only enough to keep the next control. And I hear crickets on this. So much so that we can destroy this idea of anthropomorphic climate change, global warming, completely destroy it. They will continue because they're criminal parasites, and there's no one to arrest them. So that try to stop a bank robber with a note. He gives a note. You say, hey, listen, I want you to arrest yourself. What are you going to do to you? He's got a bank robber. He's got a gun. He's going to rob a bank. And you say, hey, you walk up and say, hey, I don't think you should do that. You think he's going to stop robbing that bank? The science is settled. When I get articles like this, satellite sees La Nina's exit a la nada. Arrival, climate forecasting enters limbo, puzzling period between Earth cycles. One scientist sees we don't have La Nina at all. We don't have La Nina either. We got La Nada. Nothing's going on. We're in a cyclic pause. That puzzles these people. Why? Because the IPCC will not factor anything outside of human causation. When in actuality, it's actually man-made global warming. And they are puzzled as to why there's a period of silence between cycles. Folks, this is just nature. I was fascinated. La Nada. Thought it was great. It ain't La Nina. It ain't La Nina. It's La Nada. Nothing's going on here. Why, though? They don't know. And yet they want to tell you that carbon is destroying the land when we know NASA. In fact, went back, I wanted to make sure I was remembering right. We found out that carbon dioxide, the one that Bill Gates puts at CO2, needs to go to zero. And nitric oxide, which not too many people talk about, they called that smog back in the 70s. Those are thermal mitigating gases. They do not cause warming. They work in the upper atmosphere, and they do a darn good job. Well, why I was telling you, be careful. We cut off some of the carbon right now. That sounds like it was in the atmosphere before. We might bring that cyclic cooling period on us that we were told back in the 70s. If you go and put more aerosols in the sky, whether they were absolutely harmless, yet they reflected heat away and acted as a thermal mitigator, You would hasten the cycle moving into a cooling period. But these people, not this one, Lanata, we got Lanata going on here. Nothing's going on here. He sees it, but they're puzzled. Because if they opt into nature and variability and cycles and just this what Mother Earth does, they don't have a job. What would those satellites and stuff be up there to measure the gravity under the theory that the releasing of the melting of the ice, the great glaciers were caused by global warming? What job would they have? We may not even have that. What's surprisingly here is inadvertently we wouldn't have that experiment. And to me, these tools, these sensors are all important for us investigating who we are, what we're about, or we can never get there, but I mean find out about the physical dimension that we live in order to kind of anticipate there might be some things that we don't do so good that we do have to correct. It's certainly not harvesting timber. It's certainly not improving water flows. It's certainly not allowing mineral resource development by property owners. It's certainly not by getting in everybody's face and interfering with their creative development in the world. It is in informing them on how their actions, what the ramifications of their actions are. And if you look very carefully at your statutes, this is why it sounds so simple to me. If you were just to walk in and take all your government and say, listen, you have a place to be. Why don't you get back in the place you're supposed to be? You are the limited form, not me. That we find that the government is there in every capacity. The agencies are to give information, to help monitor, to help evaluate, to help educate, to foster and encourage what we are to do at a level that doesn't harm others, giving us the information that we can decide to easier not harm others. In other words, as I tell you, the trespass, we learn information enough not to trespass on another. The information the government can give us of which we wouldn't have without that ability. And yet they've used this authority now to say you must be regulated. This is the global governance control. Now, I talk about this in the context of science. This is ultimately the economic construct. Remember, it always goes to a place where somebody's going to pay something to someone to continue the oppression. It's why I want you to see it. It's why I want people to see through quickly. I talk a little bit long on this stuff. I mean, but maybe too much because then you have to listen to the conversation a couple times. But I want people to get this, at least this one view, and I do that because it helps me. It works, this view. Things come to me that I would not have seen had I not have the view I have. Now, I don't know what doesn't come to me, so that could be the contribution that someone else makes when they roll their sleeves up and find out what they find out. But I'm always amazed that no matter how you come at some of this stuff, and no matter what you find so wrong you need to be making right, you end up having to go through all the same things to learn of the actual reality that you're against before you can take action, and then those actions end up being pretty much the same. It's not that nebulous a thing. The problem is it comes on a case-by-case basis. And I'm asking you to embrace that part, because that's on us. They're telling us that you have something to do if you don't like what you see. And if you don't like what you see and you remain silent, you're going to go the way that one has imposed upon you to do so, which defines a prison at some level anyway. Again, we were not free from fighting for being free, because someone's there to steal it away from us, to tax our lives. And they do it right in front of our face. Fascinating stuff. They get into to me sometimes I see science is nothing but this big bunch of jargon that scientists use to hide the obvious. On the other hand, I see people that are brilliant, that actually expose more of the wonder to us, that I don't know how to appreciate it more than just to be in awe of it. And we don't get enough of that, and a lot of that's been hidden, and I think we've been stunted. And I think this is globally. And we've accepted that, I guess, is the thing that I get. We accept that. Now, what some people didn't accept was this Ferguson decision, and I want to go through that kind of quickly, but I want to point out some very fundamental things for us. Partly because I want us to know those fundamental things, because part of those things that are fundamental were missed, and it's what actually needs to be changed. That's not going to be changed with what's going on, and probably, and I have to say, I've scripted, it probably planned to be that way, and the bigger danger I've realized in trying to rationalize how it's going on, that's going to keep all y'all that were good people from actually doing what you need to do. This is a lesson learned to train you to not be responsive, to focus on how it was done wrong, and then to get back into your routines. Feeling fortunate that didn't happen around you. One report on this caught my eye, and it starts to get us to the point of what was happening. And it's really in this essence, two very basic things that people may not have understood, that I didn't hear not many people talking about, then a couple people did. But what struck me was this title of this next report. It says, "It's incredibly rare for a grand jury to do what Ferguson's just did." And I don't want to read on and on, but what struck me with that is when you see what the Ferguson jury did, in talking about being equal protection under the law, I don't know how many of you all have ever seen a jury go that long on a criminal indictment for anybody else. That was what was rare about this for me. Maybe you don't understand how hand cherry-picked these grand juries are anymore. Maybe you do. And that starts the problem. But what struck me was the amount of testimony they looked at, the amount of inquiry that they did, the amount that what we're told anyway was what was going on in that seemed unprecedented in the normal scheme of things. I don't know if many people get that kind of integration with a grand jury before an indictment issues. A lot of times, they just issue the indictment. They don't even have to do that. They just go out on information, and people don't know how to argue all that. But there was some very important problem. Regardless of the content. In fact, let me get into that a little bit, just on the grand jury. Did it occur to anybody that body only finds probable cause? It only finds probable cause. And I saw lots of people twittering and commenting and emailing the inconsistency of the evidence before the grand jury. And they were complaining about that was proof of some kind of a setup. Well, for me, I saw the setup a different way. What I'm going to tell you is that that's normal. The problem is on a probable cause hearing, which they're focused on, they can't do anything else. They can't cure the ills of the society. They can't even stop the problem that caused them to be cherry-picked. They can't stop how the prosecutor's going to present that to them. They can't do the systemic problems. They can't fix the apathy of the people until it's time to burn this place down. That guy should have been put in jail. As soon as the first Molotov cocktail went off, that guy should have been put in jail. The guy, I think, was a stepfather, burned this place down. That's inciting riot. He should have been put in jail. The grand jury looked at evidence to find probable cause. Do you know, folks, think about this, and be careful about jumping too much. I don't want to look at what it did. I want to see what the process does to help all of us. Do you know what inconsistencies of witnesses tends to do to probable cause? Beyond a reasonable doubt type of stuff? The inconsistencies get in the way of that? That the very inconsistencies complained of as being evidence of some tampering was actually the proof that guy was going to get off. Because the inconsistencies do not prove a reasonable belief to believe. I also heard a guy named Lionel. He said this is the best analysis. He did a very good analysis. I tweeted it out. He actually focused on this point himself. And I said, there's one guy he happens to be a prosecutor or a defense attorney at one point, so he kind of knows the inside of that as well, better than I do. But just on the point of the function of the grand jury, not the petite or trial jury, or the jury trial jury, but those privileged people that come underneath their privilege of driving and the cherry picking from that problem I told you about. But this grand jury finds out whether or not there's probable cause to indict. And inconsistent testimony, inconsistent evidence will negate the ability for that to happen, just by nature. And I'm going to suggest to you that's what I want. I'd want that. My problem with it is nobody got fired up about the fact that this doesn't happen for everybody. As an aside observation, I didn't really look into Ferguson. To me, it was just another false flag type scripted psyop. So I'm looking for the clues. But the prosecuting attorney, did something very, very interesting. Stated something very, very interesting, which to me was indicative of somebody else, another prosecuting attorney in this nation, doing the exact same thing. And it's a method of people who are in a position of authority and obligation and power, who take the final liability for something, to be able to deflect a lot of that blame. That the prosecuting attorney made a statement in the hearing right after, and to tell you the truth, I missed the part where the probable cause wasn't stated. I still can't find where they said that. But at any rate, notwithstanding that, he stated he had to make a correction, that he didn't actually do the case. His deputies did. And I remember hearing Eric Holder say the exact same thing on some other things. And I remember that allowed me to think, oh, this has been influenced by Washington from the inside. Now, we've had speculation on that, and we could kind of see that might be. You actually hear Eric Holder's now threatening Wilson again. You don't run away so far. It may not be over yet for you. But here, I'm trying to process here procedures, and protections that's not available to everybody, but was to this cop. Now, the reason why you don't do it yourself is so that you can have some plausible deniability, isn't it? So this thing was set up to fail. And then we find out later that in fact the deputy attorneys gave the wrong statute of the standard for the grand jury to rule by, and then they corrected it, knowing, as you know, this is a plan. They knew they would get caught if they did that, so they did correct it, but they downplayed the the fact that the standard was unconstitutional, and just mitigated the original one that the people had been using for weeks and weeks as a standard. And you understand, when you use a framework in your mind to conform your ideas, it's going to be very difficult in the last moment to change to the new standard. When it was inquired upon of whether or not the Supreme Court can override Missouri law, the deputy district attorney said it's not important. So there was a plan, folks, and there was a plausible deniability set up, I believe, in the way, and there was a couple of other things in the press conference. This was set up from Washington. That prosecutor did what he was told to give him a distance. They gave it on to some deputies who did some violations, and it's also inside that you see some of the testimony. It was pointed out that if you look at what the prosecutor did, if this was a trial, the prosecutor was leading the cop into making the statements he had to become a use of force defense. Now, leading the witness would in almost every case be a real objection, wouldn't it? In other words, getting this guy that you're supposed to be there to prosecute to see if he should be put in front of a trial, which you think he would have just done automatically like almost everybody else is. Like I said, the unprecedented part of this is that you had the hearing at all before the grand jury and that amount in intensity, whose job is just to find probable cause, the inconsistencies in the evidence of which it guaranteed absolutely zero chance, but that you also had the guy who was being investigated in there testifying in his own behalf, being led by the prosecutor to give the answers for a defense under use of force provision. I'm not getting into the truth of it, the lie of it, or anything. I'm just talking about the process here. and why and where it has failed and why the people went wrong in not focusing on that system that brings the injustice. This system has been in place for a long, long time. It's needed to be fixed forever since then. This is where we should focus our attention instead of going on the street and burning down for whatever good that is and looting people's property. These are our neighbors, folks. Although in some of the videos I saw that the people on the ground, they were saying a lot of people coming out of Illinois to go do this looting and burning. So there was another, some agitators and provocateurs were brought in. This was comments from the people in the street who lived there. They made the direct observation. The governor didn't do anything. They knew what was going to happen. There was no armed guards around the businesses at all. This was a setup, and we can see all that. But I want to get back to the process. There's a process inside the system that is being used against the people. And to tell you the truth, I have to go with whatever the jury found at this point because I wasn't there. I didn't see the evidence. I didn't have the questions. I wasn't given the experience. I'm not talking outside of the culpability or the charge or what's going on. There's a problem here, folks. We've got to solve it at the first step. Now, what was interesting, what Lionel had said in his video, if you get that, I don't have that, but you might seek it out about the answer for what the grand jury did. He pointed out something there that he would not advise anyone to go to a grand jury indictment as the one that was the target. He would not advise that to happen. And what I found as an anomaly in that is that this cop didn't he? He said, Lionel was saying, if you got to protect yourself, you don't go in and testify against yourself. Because what they do is they set you up for a perjury charge after on the slimmest of evidence. That he would not advise a client, if it was a client, to go in to go testify that this guy, the cop, was testifying to the hilt, folks, and being guided to say the correct things before a jury that was misinformed in the law. And here's the problem, folks. The jury was misinformed in the law. Whose fault was that? We do it to ourselves, folks. And then we do it to each other, which is exactly what the scenario has to be and needs to be to keep us ineffectual. It kind of drives me nuts. I watch this stuff. There's a ton to talk about on this subject. I don't really want to get into it all. It's so convoluted and made that way. You can't. That's Gordian knot. I don't even want to waste time untying or trying to. And I can do pretty good at this stuff. But with me just looking in, it means nothing. That I want you to understand that you can look in and there's some problems with this. They do not get to the point of the merits, though. They get to the point, the process fails, and that's it. You really can't move beyond there. That people went out and destroyed stuff over that and calling it injustice, and then brings up racism as a point. You know the racism that's going on? It's the Bar Association. Remember, Doubleday Dictionary, 1976. The word race, you go look it up, you look at the example, they say the race of lawyers. That's the racism that's going on. It's them against you. And they used all the rights that you claimed that you thought was protecting you against you. Someone analyzed this situation and system, and they figured you out. And I hear crickets on it. And I mean, the fires and the looting and the dead people now, even the witnesses were being attacked and killed after the fact, is crickets. Because what I'm talking about is effective response. Not ineffective or divisive response, where we start eating our own. Questions started to come out. As I said, I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to read off some stuff just quickly as headlines. I don't want to move on because time just kind of ticks along here. Did they want more violence in Ferguson? 10 coincidences too glaring to ignore. I think this was an important article. I have it up here to say. I was going to talk more about it, but it just stops making sense to me to even worry about it because, of course, they wanted whatever keeps the people divided. They wanted whatever keeps the people off the point. And let me tell you something about, if you haven't figured it out, it's not just Ferguson. I said the Bar Association. That's international. They're playing us like a fiddle, folks. They're playing us like a fiddle. And we're singing, we saw it. They're playing us just like crickets. Asking the question, folks. Are the coincidences too glaring? Well, yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know what to have. They were there. They were planned. What else can you say? What else is there to say? It was a plan that works. It's working. And not many really see the point of it. They commingled something inside the system with a social ill that is not going to be fixed until we start fixing these internal social systems that have been corrupted by those that oppress us. While Michael Brown happened, it came out more people looking out more globally. I mean, bigger area, even into Illinois, where those people came out of Illinois to go loot and burn the town, underneath a direction by the promoters, and we're finding out who is the inside of that. That's not turning out to be so good. And so the most people that are sensible say, oh, well, I'm not going to even deal with this. I'm just going to shut it all out. I'm just going to hunker back down. Life's tough. I got food. I got meals to put on the table. I've got bills to pay, and that's going to be where I'm going to live, right there, because that's just easiest for me to do. But at the same time, comes out a story out of Zero Hedge. Forget Ferguson. 244 teenagers have been shot in Chicago since Michael Brown died. And this has been my problem generally, folks. Where has been everybody in all the executions up until now? That Ferguson gets all the air and the focus, and from the Washington, D.C., the den of criminals. $244, folks. What happened to the outrage on those? Instead, as this moves on, like Occupy, these setups, these are other psyops, these are other false flags, if you will, in a different way. It's now shown, and you see a picture. You get the link in the blogcaster. For those of you that go, I ask you that you do. It took a lot of time to put that in there. It gives you the stuff that you see for yourself. Agitators calling for a communist revolution outside Ferguson Police Department. There's a sign. They have smash racist cops with communist revolution. Progressive Labor Party. If you don't think that progressives were communists, there it is. And I also heard something, and I didn't have time to go prove it, but somehow, if I remember, I think it was Rockefeller possibly has a room in a skyscraper, an area, or a bas relief that's on the outside of the building, and it's chiseled into their marble. It says progress. And it just occurred, I hadn't known that before. I don't check out this stuff, but it occurred to me, well, anything progressive has to be originating from the Rockefellers. I think it's Rockefellers. So you know them by who they associate with and what their actions are, and who gloms on to take on, and without enough. See, again, the silence condemns that. But a communist revolution is being called for. And they tie in the racist cops. But what about the racist lawyer association? Remember, the dictionary said, they used the example of the race of lawyers. And if you understand what race is, it's just a separate group from any other. That's a race. At least by one definition. There's few definitions for race. It's not that spooky. And it's not centralized on what the political agendas focuses on. We do that. And it's not called for. Because the whole object is to continue the division, and it is to bring on a politically communist, not communally communist, but politically communist affront to our way of life, which is oppressive control. Exactly what they tend to want. And then you see the places that could be protected are by the government that's supposed to do the protection not protected, to show you they're not working for you. And yet, with all the crickets and the wrongdoing, There are, the silver linings is very thin, but they're still there. Within this storm, you see there's people that are not insane, easily the lemmings. They're not going to suffer the fate of the hyperbolic determinism of the lemmings leap. They will think for themselves. They will respond in principle. They will not be divided. And I want us to see that too, because in response to this nonsense and not going after the system to be fixed, the system that's been changed over time, as you find an occupying force is under international law, can do, change the laws over time. That you see the Bar Association doing this to subvert our whole system and the purpose for it, and we don't notice it. Something that the mining law really focused me on, being able to jump back way long before there was that much influence, has really been able to bring the clarity to me of how it happened today, how it's being done today. That we see that there's people that won't do the lemming, that won't suffer the hyperbolic determinism of the lemmings leap, and they act responsibly. And they're not just white. Because this isn't a race black and white problem that way. It's being fomented as one, but I don't think so. United, the story of United, folks, the silver lining that we need to rely on, that I keep telling you, work locally with your own people. Don't let this become the skin color problem that the actual foreign group is imposing upon you, like the Bar Association might, like literal political associations might with their agendas. United, black gun owners protect white-owned business during Ferguson riots. A group of Ferguson residents who happened to have dark skin, armed with pistols and AR-15s, descended upon a business which happened to be owned by a person with light skin. These four men stood outside of this business, which was a Conoco gas station, to protect it from rioters and looters who burned other businesses to the ground over the past week in Los Angeles area. The reason for these three brave men protected this business had nothing to do with their skin color, nor the skin color of the owner of the store. These men were protecting the Conoco gas station owned by Doug Morello, because Morello has employed them over the years. They have mutual interest in store's survival as well as respect for one another. And isn't that the fact? This is what we need. Mutual interest, I extend it to the whole community. What greater interest than we have than to not be divided and burn ourselves to the ground? What greater interest than we have than to not arrest the guy that says burn this place down because he didn't like the decision of a system that was set up to take him down anyway? Where has he been all this time? That's us too, folks, not just him. But to call for burning a place down because you didn't like that answer to a system you have no clue about why you're doing that? And then you see that people not everyone runs with their emotions. They run with their interest. We have to expand our interest sufficient that we watch each other's back. We don't allow ourselves to do these things. Another story, the silver lining. And my hat's off to these people, though I just don't know sometimes. I listen to what they're doing because we work behind the scenes and interact with some of these people in these organizations. And, everyone gets their own opinion, I guess. But we find that it's misinformed. But in action, my hat's off to them. The Oath Keepers guard rooftops in downtown Ferguson. And out of a sense of duty, the Oath Keepers showed up to protect what they could, what manpower they could, with the capability that military training brings you and police training put to proper application. They were able to protect at least a building where 75 yards away, what they didn't have manpower to protect, it burned. And the police weren't there either, and the National Guard was not there. But people step up to protect you. You step up with yourself to protect you. The government will not do it. This is, by definition, a war, if the government will not do its duty. I heard a comment made, and I can't remember now what it is. I put it on the blogcast for last week. when the officials stop doing their job, you have no obligation to follow the law that way. Doesn't mean you lose your principles and go nuts. It means you have to have enough in you to do the better thing, and despite all that. Because we come to the time when the cops believe they're their own law. There is none, so they make their own up. This is how you get bullies and brutes and thugs and gangs. That also, as I said, 244 teenagers died in the same time of Ferguson, and nary a peep for those little chicks out there that don't want to be the crickets. Just at the same time as the Ferguson condition, there was another shooting that I'm stunned after seeing the video. There isn't more statement. There's crickets on that. Where's the injustice being rallied on here? Now we have video. There's no testimony about it. There's no manipulation by the prosecutor of the system of a system you don't even know exists, that works to promote the system and the plunder that the system has. There's a video that literally shows, and I don't even agree with this statement, but he actually did, but we don't have a definite time. I don't even know if it was a time that could be stated. At the same time as this rioting is going on, cops didn't wait 1 second before shooting a 12-year-old holding a toy gun. Now, that doesn't sound like much until you see the video. And this, not 1 second, and then you see some people saying about 2 seconds, that must have been timing it from before you see when the cops come flying off the road and enter the grass in front of the pavilion that the kid's standing on, in front of. Because I don't think a second passes before the car is stopped and the kid's laying on the ground. It's now instant execution. And then this problem that we've heard that everybody seems to be ignoring. It's long before it gets to this problem is long before it gets to the grand juries. That failed system. That officer that shot him, no matter, they say about he's a 12-year-old, who cares? The officer who shot that guy, a kid, holding that toy gun, even if it was a real one, refused to give him first aid. Now, where is the outrage? See, I don't care about the color. I don't care about his age. Where is the outrage? You got instant execution and no aid given to allow the one who's been shot to survive, guilty or innocent. What happened to presumed innocence anyway? That I hear crickets. What country do you live in that the cops will not give you aid once they've summarily and instantaneously executed you? That conforms to some constitutional delusion that you have, that you're not standing up against. That instead you go and you become part of an action that's like Occupy, and in this case we see communist infiltrators come in and they want to declare war on the police in your name, underneath the Communist Party. What is this nonsense? We have the example of people coming together united to protect themselves against that stupidity, where the government will not. And we don't see any outrage over this, which to me is clearly indefensible, on about every level. And I don't really make him 20 and give him a real gun. Make him white. I don't care what you do. We're allowing this type of oppression and tyranny, and I don't know the words. I don't know the words, how bad this is. That we allow that and we get over the trifles of something we don't understand in a grand jury process, that we don't understand at all, and we'd rather say that justice was not done because we didn't understand the system was not just to begin with. And we took no steps ahead of time to stop that, to fix that system. Instead, we allow it to foment and get bigger and spread across the nation to the point where somebody finally takes action. And this could have got serious, but more power to him on the point. However, this is what they do. They get us divided. The ones that are promoting the closure of I-5 down in San Diego got someone so irate, he got in the megaphone holder's face and took his megaphone and told him, I've got 6 kids to feed, I've got to get to my job, and you are keeping me from doing that. That man is trying to defend his family over this nonsense. As I looked at it, a group of people that got themselves onto a highway to block the highway, which, when the police finally showed up, they said, we're not going to arrest anybody because they did it peacefully. Which I can tell you is a felony, because the right-of-way of the highway was everybody else's right to travel, the use of which of the protesters along the side would not have, under color of the First Amendment, obstructed the normal use of the highway, to show that the police extended to the protesters a title to the land that they did not have, the act of which is a felony for the cops at that point and the protesters. That I see again a failure on the other side. I have no problem with the people protesting. But we're not supposed to protest, or it's like your right to free speech stops where you're going to say fire in a theater. I mean, there is these limits. That this is a confrontation that I'm glad didn't go worse. But it was a good lesson to know that we have to stand up for ourselves, a bad lesson on the government not doing actually what the law would dictate should be done. Again. So this system is our trouble, and we would rather beat up ourselves, destroy our own lives, destroy property, destroy the lives of people working hard to make a life for themselves and their families who don't work, who have businesses, and the investment and the time. I don't know if you've all been a small business operator. It's not easy. And it's worse and worse and worse as the years go on, as these plunderers in office take control without any more resistance. That we have a system that needs to be condemned, not our fellow people and fellow neighbors. Another story comes out to show the system is not infallible. It doesn't even come close. It does things contrary, in the first instance, contrary to all sense. It's located in the prosecutor's office, this system that they've allowed. And we'd rather beat up on ourselves or use this thing and get ourselves to be beating up on ourselves than to look at the ones who are actually causing us. Another report now. These 2 men spent 39 years in jail and were sentenced to death for a crime they did not commit. The prosecutor knew that, folks. Where's the outrage for these 2 men? Do you go burn down the auto parts store or the Caesar? Well, it was funny that Little Caesars was burning while Obama was fiddling with Ferguson. Do you go burn down the auto parts store because these guys were put in jail wrongly? Or do you just, or what? Do you do nothing otherwise? Or do you focus on what the real problem is? I think I've identified the real problem. Or not a major one to start with. The system that allows you to live in an open-air prison or a battlefield America, as I've been able to identify it to you for years, has been with us so long as to make what happened to Michael Brown irrelevant. And yet, it's everything we focused on, and all for the wrong reasons. How about the question, isolated incidents? Talk about misdirected anger. 40 cops in 30 days racked up dozens of charges of child rape and sexual abuse. America's police departments have a dirty little secret. However, this sick and twisted pattern of abuse is becoming quite a large pile of dirt to keep sweeping under the rug. When, folks, are you going to lift the rug? When? Don't burn down the house around the rug. Pull the rug and get the dirt. Don't steal all the stuff out of the place before you burn it down and leave the carpet with the dirt. Go after the dirt. Go after the real corruption, the real adulteration, the real oppressors. You will have to learn how you will do that, and it will take a multi-stage front to do so. I haven't even focused on that problem yet. I thought it was going to be easy to say, here, there's one little law right here. It says we got property. Now honor it, government. 10 years later, I'm finding out that's going to be a little bit of trouble. Because we've proven and knew so. That's why the point, and that was part of the point of hitting that. We knew we were in an occupied world. Long time ago. And this is one way to point that out without opinion, without misresearch. We let them tell us that they're the criminal they are. To remove any and all doubt that a lot of people want to use as an excuse not to respond or to deny or to challenge and then do nothing or to do the wrong thing. Why aren't we, who's really looting the nation, folks? But those, essentially, we call it Wall Street. Eric Holder is the Attorney General. He's sitting in the seat of decision on the prosecutions. He allows these people to walk at the same time. He's going to go after this cop who walked underneath a technical abuse of the process that's been created by Eric Holder. Why aren't we going after the people that have been allowed, the other type of plunder that's, I told you, the economic harm that's come upon this nation? Who are the worst looters, is the question that's asked. And the answer is to look at Wall Street. How did you become too big to jail there, folks? How did you have those people become too big to fail? Where's the correct outrage? That we go and we destroy each other. With pockets of action, only pockets of protection, where we unite and we say that's not going to happen here. Where's the outrage? In the proper place. And when you see it not happening in the proper place, it's a really sad thing, first of all. Secondly, I know that there's a psychological destruction that goes on in good people. And that's just one more thing you have to throw off. That's why I suggest always just find something that is local to you. Forget the big picture for right now. Forget all that's going wrong. Just find something that's local to you, that has a somewhat general effect societally, a wrong that needs to be right, and you be the one that makes it right. And you just take your time to do it. You just take the time you have and take the time it takes with what the time you have. The system that's been set up around us, and supposedly they say for us, for your security, is really quite a sight that we, long time ago, that we should have at least started to question, if not really engaged a lot stronger. And instead we are getting led by the nose. Again, in Ferguson, to me, was another example. How easy it is for that to happen. How easy it is for us to forget. Like this, don't forget this one, the House Intel panel debunks many Benghazi theories. Well, the GOP threw the whole of the problem under the bus. And I just wanted to point this out, that means that there's no difference between the political parties. It's really why we sued them both, because they're both part of they're another race. The political parties are another race, regardless of what their colors are. Their gang colors. They're a race apart of people and what they actually need. And hot on the heels of that Benghazi report, which I told you back in 2012, 1 month after it happened, I had a friend, I just know, like I said, I don't know how I have these friends, didn't know they were that well connected up, but was a friend of mine who ends up being an inside report for me about Benghazi, was super critical about what had happened, because the protocol, as you remember, I said, and you haven't heard anything about this, was that the protocol for anybody in a State Department condition is rescue. The only one, as the past protocol would have determined, where there was accountability, would have been that the only one that could stop that exercise, that function, that extraction, that protection, would have been the unqualified one. And with this report that you think comes from the GOP, you think that the Republicans are going to go crucify Obama with this. No, they're all in bed together. Lindsey Graham comes out and says the new Benghazi report full of crap. And the reason why he's saying it's because they lied to him, and he was part of one of the initial reporting, the inquiry boards. That I went immediately back to my source, and I said, and I made a preparatory statement to my question, and I identified the things that were omitted in this report. And my source said, oh, you noticed. And I'm just going to tell you, folks, the things that I identified that were omitted that he told me that were in there, that this GOP-based investigatory body, so-called, had to look at, was the very thing that eliminates the culpability of the one who had the decision. And so I had another question. I said, well, why wasn't that a pervading imposition, this standard, this protocol? And the answer to me was that because since then, those that were involved with that protocol and working out when something fails, they have to fix it, right? This is serious stuff. And so it failed, and they have the internal security, the internal national security had to look at this and say, how did it fail? Well, they found out it actually didn't. But those people that were looking at it in this capacity are now gone. They were removed. That I would ask you, don't forget about Benghazi. This is, for all of y'all that are in military and in service, this is telling you something to you. I hope you picked that up. There's no rules now. There's no expectations. The psychopaths are ruling the asylum. That these inquiries are the same systemic problem. All of this, you can just see it over and over. Once you see this stuff, it's almost like the view you can't unsee. And hard as I might try to go some way else and to disprove that it even existed, the facts end up developing themselves and you just can't deny it. The system of things needs to be changed at a very fundamental level. That we can't fix Benghazi, we can't fix the overthrow of the government as one big issue. We can do a couple of things, though. We can do working locally. We can get experienced in how to work locally, and we can withdraw from and keep from engaging that system that hurts us. Challenging that system at every turn. Challenging those that get in office that continue to perpetuate that system at every turn. I'll just say, as I flashed that in my mind, I got a little disappointed because over all the time I've been doing this, there's just a handful that will do. But we need to do better. We need to have that impetus, like the Oath Keepers felt in Ferguson, like the black guys over there just trying to keep their jobs. Having a mutual interest, expanding our interest large enough that we protect ourselves, like Russia's starting to do. Again, where the United States in this Benghazi is just indicative of this plunder, this warmongering that the United States does. The United States responsible for 2/3 of all military conflicts Russia's top brass has analyzed. See, they're in the crosshairs right now, Russia is. And we've kind of discussed all that. Again, this is lawlessness in the world. Benghazi was just the tip of the iceberg. It continues. We can go through all the analysis. I don't want to do that. I want to point out that these people that are in Washington need to be gone. This thing needs to be changed. And you can do it somewhat locally. You can start looking locally for the nitty-gritty of it. It's a little bit difficult in initial to pick it all up. To overthrow your own your delusion. It's very difficult, but it's doable. It can be done. The doability. It's doability. It's all what you want. Because you're silenced to anything that's not right, it continues. As we start looking at the United States government, is really we were told it was going to be, it's the police, it's a military execution squad of the world. And it uses all kinds of device and deceptions to do what it needs. No different than I was bringing up this science. The science seems to be problematic from the start, but the United States government uses sustainable development, from which all this science feeds into, for all these climate changes, to go and oppress your life. If we needed more proof, Germany's DW reports is supply lines originate in NATO's Turkey. So Benghazi was showing us something, if we look at the truth of that. And I tend to believe my source than I do these people in government. I mean, in government that are supposed to be your so-called leaders. What leash are they holding onto your nose, folks, if they're a leader? But Germany is now looking, the reports from Germany are coming out that is really just, again, as we've proven over and over, it's a tool of the West to destroy other nations. And if as I said, the mirror over there, if they're willing to destroy other nations, they're willing to destroy you, if it's not clear yet. And they use the law to justify it, because you, my dear citizen, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, has no other rights than to enjoy pains and punishments and penalties. If you want to read that, what your equal rights are as every other slave and prisoner, is to go read Title 42, Section 1981. Pains and punishments and penalties. Oh, and I just happened to be doing my broadcast, preparing for it last night, and I heard the Freakers Ball replay from, I think, 2 weeks ago. Heard Solomon, and watch out for yourself. He instructs us that the numbers I gave you were wrong, and I told you, send me the information, find out. And I hadn't thought about that. We don't think about this stuff, but when he said it was exactly right. I forgot about this angle. He wanted to clarify for us. He's living in Brazil. It's why he calls in anonymously to Freakers Ball. It's that the 11,005-year execution that police do in that country is only the official record, that he was saying that it's probably more like 11,000 a year. And his warning for us in the United States is that's our future. And thank you very much, Solomon, for responding to that. Watch yourself. I know you are, but this is the world we're living in. Our governments lie to us. Our governments put on a nice, happy, shiny face, and it's not the case. They're out there to hurt you. They underwrite and they promote criminality. As I've told you, this war, you see the licensing, the legalization of crime in Title 50, where they allow vaccines and they to come in, and they give immunity to these companies, and the bottom line is the bottom line. So patents are commerce, and so and then you see the agencies of the government legalizing the plunder of the people that are well lobbied and positioned, and yet. While what's going on and what's happening with Michael Brown is going down every day, there's millions and millions, more than the 244 teenagers that died since then. There's millions and millions of people being harmed Whether or not to death, I can't tell, over agreements by the government to allow big corporations to kill you. And I hear crickets. I see nothing. I don't see the commerce arteries shut down for this transportation, where we find study shows dramatic correlation between GMOs and 22 diseases. There is growing movement for labeling of GMO crops, and many would go further to ban completely. Currently, there is a close vote in Oregon. I still haven't heard the outcome of that. But those who profit from GMO spend $20 million preventing labeling in Oregon. Several states in the Northeast have put in place laws that will require labeling. So, as I say, you agree to GMO contamination to the biology, don't you, with labeling? The point is, as we read through this article, there's studies coming out that show that these GMOs are tied to 22 diseases. I was explaining to you the initial invasion, violation to the cell without injecting anything will cause byproducts, the most basic building blocks of defense in the cell, which transmute out into its growth, that affects people, that can't help but cause other trouble, whether or not, dis-ease, discomfort, dis-ease, something worse. That these kinds of things you have to pay attention to. This is a government allowing this against you, and I hear crickets. No, there's lots of people moving on this, but you see the fight that's going on in Maui that John Rappaport has been covering like crazy. The GMOs are over there attacking Maui County. The people voted; they don't want any of these problems in their island, and the judge just came back and said, "Well, no, you can't do that." Now, I sent a Twitter over to him saying that U.S. D.C. court has no jurisdiction. It's a territorial federal court. It's not the Constitutional Article 3 court, and the judge is not qualified because he's a magistrate, and he can't decide property law locally. But this is, so I asked him, are the attorneys causing the defeat here? Because this is that's the racism that's going on. This race of lawyers, this bar association. And I would have not been so sure, I would never have been as sure as I am if I hadn't been doing what we've been doing for quite a long time, and in particular with the lawsuit, and in particular suing the bar association, and in particular catching them red-handed, and everything else we could do that shows that they're just a gang of thugs under color of an authority. That the government, they're part of that government condition that allows these laws that come on and to hurt you. As we found out, vaccines don't work. Malignant mumps in MMR vaccinated children. For those of you that got little babies that are getting this vaccine, you better pay attention. You'll get in a broadcaster. I'm already done. Look at this. Oh, and speaking of John Rappaport, the anti-GMO movement PR agencies. Remember I talked to you a long time ago. I said, watch out. Monsanto's attorneys and Dye Chemicals attorneys are writing these bills for labeling. They exempt themselves. Well, John Rappaport's got a report. Anti-GMO movement's PR agencies are for these people. These people being the corporations. Corporations are people too. Where was the outrage to that, folks? It looks like we reached the end of the time today. Wow, lots of stuff. I'm really getting too many tabs on my board. We can go on and on. I tell you, we really can go on and on. Contact me at markonthebeast@yahoo.com. Tailor tailor the content to something that's relevant to you. I don't really know more to do right now until I see more interest. I try to point out right now what we're seeing is really in our face. To me, it's a target-rich environment, and I don't know why we're not stepping up in the right way. I don't know why, as a society, we are so ignorant to the processes. So, stay tuned to all the places that you're listening, and support and donate to all the hosts, the networks, to keep them going. And thank you to the FM and AM broadcasters we got. Talk to you next week.